I think the recognition of the number of places that have been put forward in Garden Place indicate that that needed further addressing in terms of an HHA, recognising that the council brief was to look at primarily residential HHAs, but it did mean that what potentially may have value already hasn't yet been addressed as an area. And just item 38 there, I also noted and concurred that we do have places that have now fallen below the threshold, many of them, of high significance, but they are still of importance to the community. And I would agree that places like the former other half of the courthouse, sitting down in Pembroke Street, and a number of others could really do with some interpretation, which of course is outside of the district plan. But I think a marking of the substantial items that have been put forward and that have fallen below the threshold perhaps could be taken up at a later stage by council and or community. So, just thinking what else. So I think perhaps the next thing is to look at the table of specific items.
Just before you go there,
yes?
and it's an issue that's obviously occurred to us as well, is that there are places which but for the lack of assessment or the lack of complete assessment could well have formed part and parcel of the schedule. What's your thinking in terms of how those well, not those particular ones, but in general the process for actually capturing those and perhaps promoting them or considering them in due course or in the next tranche or whatever?
I think part of the reason why there was a large group of places put forward by the Waikato Historical Group and the Society is that we already know these places and they've been identified for 30 years. The additional evidence and drafts that have been done add to that. I think the ability to be able to interpret and put up signage relies on perhaps a cooperative approach. It also relies on funding and having parties who are able to actually do that. It would be good to see it in cooperation.
But does your group or does anybody keep a register of potential places, if you like? I mean, how is this captured and retained?
Yes, well, it's a good question. So in the distant past, which I may be part of, the local branch of Historic Places Trust, Heritage New Zealand, was the main contributor, along with the Waikato Historical Society. And so this large list that's been generated has actually been generated by existing resources to a high degree. So they are actually sitting there as an existing resource. And then there's been more that have been contributed in this process. We won't mention that a number of these have fallen in terms of demolition. We will, over the last period as well, which is part of the process, of course. Yes, if we could, that would be appreciated. So this table is my best attempt to work through items that are contested and items that are not, items that are supported by Hamilton City Council and items that are not. It also includes 2 that are no longer tabled for clarification. So 36, which is the house 24 Marama Street, the owners did actually do a further submission. This is no longer tabled and have taken on the advice of HCC on this. The vacuum oil Caltex building 149 has been demolished in the last 2 weeks. So there's really not a lot of point in progressing this any further. I can clarify it's ground zero on the site itself. So that's gone. And so this marks those 2 places that are no longer on the table. Then there are a group. Oh, sorry.
So I'm curious about it. Was that holder of a certificate of compliance for demolition? Do we know?
I don't think that would be necessary because it's not an existing scheduled item. So,
Right, okay.
Yes, many within the Waikato Heritage Group's grouping did not have existing heritage, in fact probably all of them, would not have had HCC scheduling and have been notified back in 2022. And of course the owners have the right to demolish. The next group are the ones that are supported by HCC's expert on this, Mids Cadogan, and not contested by the owners. And this includes 051, which is the former Gallagher residence, where the owners actually did do a further submission that supported this. And then you'll see that the remainder are primarily the places that are owned by Hamilton City Council, all of which have been visited. And with some minor adjustments, Waikato Heritage Group will proceed and agree, of course, and support. One item that's not on there is 110, which is 9 Wecker Street, and Miss Williams will speak to that.
Evacuate the building using the nearest fire exit. Evacuate the building using the
Right, where were we? You're about to conclude, I think.
I wish.
Right, we're back with you, thank you. Right.
Yes. So just back to the next group that are on the table are the ones that Hamilton City Council have supported, but there's also further submissions on them. So those owners, of course, have still to either speak or to for their evidence to be put forward, as the case may be. So the first one is the Maunda residence, which the council has supported and the owners have actually supported as well. That was back in 2022, and there was an email to that effect. The next, of course, is the hitching post, the two hitching posts. And HCC, of course, is the owner, and these two have been agreed to. Also, the EOPs have also been put into the updated forms and see that it's very suitable to have a little bit more extent around these two little items. The pump house, which is also owned by Hamilton City Council, is two buildings primarily. It's the 1902 pump house, which remains towards the back of the site, hidden behind some trees. And then it has a very large 1956 addition, basically another building placed in front of it. And this was quite a significant historical moment in Hamilton, a little town getting its waterworks, and the pipeline went all the way up to the lake here, to the water tower that's now no longer there. But there is another one. So I agree with the rank B on this, and also agree with the EOP and also with the exclusions that have been suggested. There is just a little bit of discussion. It's been quite difficult to find council plans, and for the more modern building that's sitting there, it still remains with a slight question mark, subject to finding further evidence, which may, for instance, be in the council records held over in the library under the minute books. Oops. The next item is the Dame Hilda Ross. This again is owned by Hamilton City Council and until recently sat beside the Founders Memorial Theatre. It's noted that the theatre is now being demolished, and its integration with this building was an aspect of it, but in writing the assessment we were well aware that the building was being demolished. So you'll note also we were talking before about regional and local, and generally in the round of assessments that I've been putting forward, I did not record whether it was local or regional, but that has been updated if possible in the new documentation. So what I've indicated with this is agree with the rank. The EOP modified the form, but sort of disagreed on terms of the historic value. It is, I think, probably rather problematical when you're trying to find enough evidence to say that this is actually important under historic value, also to take on board something which is really at this point getting close to 60 years, but for many people it's very early history. It's hard to document a place where generations of children and people continue to splash in that particular pond if there was water in it, which there currently isn't. I would agree that under C, this has been amended because its context is no longer high as a result of its associated building being removed. But it stands in its own right as a memorial to Dame Hilda Ross and is seen as particularly important to the city. The next item is George Parr House, which is hidden way over in Piranha Park, and for many people would be completely unknown. This has been supported by council and is owned by council. I agree with the rank B. Also agree with the exclusions that Ms Cadigan has suggested. I think this is a very good way. This is an example of showing items that are non-contributing and making it very clear in a wider site what those aspects actually are. The next item is actually the Memorial Bridge, which spans between Purana Park and Memorial Park and is directly associated to George Parr and also Annie. And this one is very strongly a favourite around Hamilton City and a little bit further afield. It's well known as the bridge that you have your pictures taken on when you're getting married. And so although there's not a lot of documentation about its importance in terms of cultural qualities, this is something that should be included. It does have an additional element to its qualities. But agree in principle with what Ms Cadogan has been saying. And the next item, also owned by Hamilton City Council, sits over off Cobham Drive, and this is the little bull sculpture, which sits quite in the middle, but does have a park-like setting around it. I'd agree with its rank as B, and also there's been a recommendation that we add some more area to the setting around the actual sculpture, and also agree with that, and indicated that quite happy for a change to be made to quality D. But in terms of cultural, I think again this is one where a quick search on the internet and you find multiple discussions about the value of this particular little sculpture in the middle of a park. And with Hamilton, it has so few of these early sculptures and items that you can play all over as a child. This is where that one sits. But I do note with this one that in terms of its technological importance, these kinds of things really do need to be assessed by an expert in arts and in sculpture, and that hasn't been included in this assessment. So agrees and support. I'd like this one to go forward to, please. Then the next category really primarily focused on further submissions that have actually come in, but that HCC has actually supported. Deanwell School will be spoken about by Ms Williams. The next one is the Delisle residence, and the current owners have put in a further submission and also provided evidence and do not support its inclusion. I agree with the recommendation from HCC. The owners have indicated that they have concerns about the process. They have concerns about cost benefits. This has been previously discussed with another built heritage item, and individual rights, property rights. And also this particular owner has indicated the problem with funding being an issue. So while they've actually provided a very wonderful and quite pictorial set of images, which actually demonstrates why this is a very important architectural building and should be considered, they have also put forward their concerns.
No, I don't have that submission in front of me, but was there further submission? What was that further? What was their opposition based on?
So their opposition was finding out very late in the piece that their place had been. But put
substantively, forward. Was it? I mean, late in the piece is.
They do not agree that it should be included because it is a place, but it has to be super significant to be placed in this type of position and put forward on the schedule.
Okay. And right. It wasn't supported by any sort of technical evaluation or anything?
No. Dr Matthews is a retired architect. He wrote the submission from what I understand. Yep. But no expert evidence was provided to support
I'll review that later. Thank you.
The next three items are bundled together as a group, and this is the former New Zealand Railways staff offices and goods shed. These come under Kiwi Rail, and they did put in an initial further submission and then also provided an additional letter. but from what I can see, there is no expert evidence that's actually been provided. They, in essence, if I'm reading what they've actually put forward, said that the concerns aren't with it being historic heritage. The concerns are how does it get to that point and where is the evidence? They question that it's not on the Rail Heritage Trust register, which is the nationally known register for railway heritage in New Zealand, and that it's not on the Heritage New Zealand listing either. Those two aspects I have covered off in with some of the documentation that sits on the end of this, on the report that's actually with the Hamilton Railway Station. The Railway Heritage Trust have not yet looked at their modernist heritage, and so the absence of modernist post-1950 railway heritage has not been addressed on their register, and they acknowledge that they're about to do so, but it will take some time. So that's why it's not seen on that particular site. And this would apply to all 5 railway places that have been put forward by the Waikato Heritage Group. So this is the goods shed and staff offices, 3, the Hamilton Railway Station, and the underground railway station. Is that 5? Yes. And all owned by Kiwi Rail. Each different, but of course associated with the wider context of railway heritage. Heritage New Zealand equally, when you look at their existing list for railway heritage, there's been very little actually put onto their list in the last decade. And the absence of not having modernist railway heritage on their list, in my view, does not reflect the fact that there's no heritage values in this area. It's more primarily a lack of resource.
Chair, if I could, just on that item, the
Yes.
underground railway station,
Yes,
you're meaning in Centre Place?
yes, under Centre Place. So yes, so the actual underground is primarily a platform, but we'll call it a station. And what's been put forward is that because it's quite rare, it's the only known underground station in the Waikato region. It's been deserted, as you'll be aware, but it has significance as its association with actually being a station and with Hamilton. It happened after they lowered, not after, it happened so that they could lower the rail underneath Victoria Street and drop the trains from stopping all the traffic. And they, at that same time, removed the old Hamilton railway station up to the university, which is scheduled by the council.
Can you confirm the parties, which parties have been made aware of? I'm particularly mindful of the complexity
Yes.
of TGH, Kiwi Property, hotel development. Is Tainui Hold, are they all aware of this?
So my understanding is that HCC did actually contact the parties, and Kiwi Rail have definitely put forward very early on a further submission, and then also provided another further submission, but did not provide expert evidence. And my understanding legally is that the different properties, the title may be New Zealand Railway Corporations, but Kiwi Rail have indicated for these 5 places in the letter that it is actually their land, and that's why they made their further submission as well. So they did not indicate there were other parties actually involved. My basic understanding is a lot of the railway land has stayed in government ownership.
Could I just have confirmation from HCC as to who we've spoken to?
Yes, I'll have to chase that down and find out exactly what has gone on. With all of these items, there have been direct letters sent. in relation to this particular item, I'll find out exactly who received letters. And I understand the point. It's not just about, in this context, Kiwi Rail. It may be that others that have the above surface interests need to be advised as well. So I'll pick that up.
Thank you.
Yes, so with the railway goods shed, I've agreed in part with what Ms Cadigan's actually said, amended it to include context, which in the case of the railway goods sheds, which are owned by Kiwi Rail but leased to a large hauling company, it still remains important. And while it's not a specific qualifier, I have remained and kept regional on this, and that references back to this, the city actually being the regional centre for railways, and so there's a much wider picture that goes into the historic value and the context.
Just a question on that one. I've just got your assessment open, and there it says overall level of heritage significant high as a group. So they've been assessed as a group. You would have heard my questions this morning about the duplexes. Do they meet the threshold individually, each of the items, or only as a group?
I initially had 3 separate ones that I did the assessments for. I think it became quite clear that potentially they could stand on their own, but going forward it would be better to see them as a place and a group. So yes, I've looked at them individually, so the goods shed and its status and the 2 offices together, but for I think the purposes of understanding the historic heritage, the group aspect would be the most appropriate approach. I think with this one, it just shows that it's not just about the buildings. So on this particular site, the history and part of the ingredients are the lines actually coming in off the main trunk line. So there's more than just the building and its placemaking, shall we call it.
And just, I guess, just going forward a little bit, I mean, if in the event that somebody wants to do something with a group, and I guess, you know, we've heard about the Penfold and so on, and there are a couple of them which are sort of clusters rather than individual properties. Do the provisions in the, and I guess Ms. Galt, this is to you as well, do the provisions provide for a consideration of that, or is it just in that sort of concept of context that's done? Because clearly if their value is enhanced by the groupness of them, then that would need to be taken into consideration in reviewing any changes. So it wouldn't just be on the particular building, it would obviously be on the group as well. So just to close that loop, if that loop is open. So I don't need an answer now, but just be mindful of that. Thank you.
The next item is the Hamilton Railway Station, and originally this was proposed as rank A. On further investigation and with the change in the criteria, this one has changed to a B ranking, in my view. And I have again noted there's no expert evidence on this particular one, but Kiwi Rail in their further submission and the letter noted a number of aspects, and again, it's the same thing, the Rail Heritage Trust and whether it was actually on that list. There are actually 4 pre-war 1945 railway stations on their list, but as they've advised, this is being readdressed as we speak. I think also part of the concerns that I could see with what the owners were saying, Kiwi Rail, with the Hamilton Railway Station, is that they're not necessarily unhappy about it if it's heritage, and it's been substantiated that it's heritage, but they're certainly concerned as to whether they can actually modify it and how they could work through with council to actually do this in a sympathetic way. And I would say that I have had an involvement in a number of railway stations and with Heritage New Zealand, and when you consider the station, it's usually the platform, the canopy, and actually the buildings, sometimes the lines, but not very often. And that many places of which the stations might be city, like Wellington or Auckland, or might be a little rural one, have found ways where it's able to be adapted, whether it's the platform lowering or, in one case, trimming back the canopy a little bit. So modifications on the existing rail network, which of course is a critical service, is actually something that is a regular occurrence to allow for changes in the size of the trains and that kind of thing. With this particular example, sometimes the canopies are a great problem. Well, with this one, it's actually got a much trimmed canopy, but it might be that in the future, just as is happening as Picton, there's going to be an awful lot of trains all lining up at the station, and it's going to be much improved, and they therefore need a new canopy. So in this particular example, I think there's enough evidence to consider if they need a canopy in the future to look back at the original design and keep something in sympathy with that, recognise that it's not the original, but it doesn't diminish the heritage values of the place by allowing that adaptation, in my view.
Sorry, just... Oh,
Yeah, no, you go.
Just to clarify, I'm a little confused because in reference to number 81 on your table,
Yes,
you spoke about the underground station, but of course that's not referring to the underground station on 81.
no, if I got the right number, I better make sure I have.
Well, because...
Oh, 80. 80,
No.
80 is the underground station.
Correct, so
That's
I think
correct.
you've muddled up the two.
Um,
So 80, well, have you? Because on 81 you talk about the railway
Ooh,
station,
yes.
but then on 80, on page 7, you talk about the New Zealand Railway Hamilton Underground Railway platform.
You are quite correct. I've got the wrong number against the railway station.
So when you refer on 81, are you talking Frankton Railway Station?
Yes, I'm talking about the Frankton railway station.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right,
Yes.
okay, that would have been helpful.
Yes.
Okay, so 81
Yes.
is Frankton Railway Station.
Yes,
80 is the underground railway platform.
yes, that's correct.
Right.
I think I've got that right.
Can I just check?
Hang on.
Can I just check then, because on the
Hang on.
sheet that I've got for Hamilton City, the 81, which shows Hamilton Railway Station at 16 Fraser Street, which is supported by Scadigan. So which one are you supporting there? Are you supporting the Frankton one or the Hamilton one? Right, okay. And is that 16 Fraser Street or is that different? All right, thank you. These above ground and undergrounds are mysteries to me, so that's all right. We'll worry
So
about
sorry,
that
the
later.
underground should be 80, and that's the one correctly
Yep.
that Ms Cadigan
That's a
hasn't looked
platform.
at. That's the platform.
Right, okay.
Yes, sorry, it's a little bit confusing.
And can I just check too that the staff offices are nowhere near the railway station?
That is
So-
correct.
They don't form part of the cluster?
No, that
Yeah.
is correct.
Yeah, good, because I was going to go there in a second, so I don't need to go there any longer. Thank you.
Yes.
Just for further clarification, Hamilton City Council staff, in your table, Mrs Callaway, you're saying that HCC agree in part, subject to HCC site visit.
That's my
That's the underground platform, and
Yes.
HCC hasn't yet visited the underground platform?
That's correct. I believe the words I used were, I agree in principle that it may demonstrate benefits, but until the site visit's undertaken, I couldn't comment further on.
Sure.
Could I just make the point that this table that Ms Callaway's produced today, I've seen it for the first time. It's paraphrasing and capturing her understanding of what Hamilton City Council has said. I've asked Ms Cadigan to carefully review the document today and be able to address you on whether it appropriately captures her position or not.
Thank you.
So that work is being done as we speak.
Wonderful. And obviously, in regards to making inquiries as to affected properties, I'm particularly interested in the underground
Yes.
railway platform because of the complexities.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That presumably would not be a difficult site visit to organise unless it's so far underground that you need some sort of mining licence.
I'm not sure it's quite as simple as that. I suspect
No,
there
it's
are
not simple.
considerable health and safety issues in play.
It's no longer in use.
No.
That's a key point to understand.
Yes. No, if I can speak to that, I would agree. Part of the reason why there's not a lot of documentation on it is that it's more a place where people break the law to get in and actually have a look, because it's been closed for many decades.
Are
One
you
of the
suggesting that Ms
entrances
Cadigan
also closed off.
is below the law or above the law? I'm not quite sure which. Yes.
Well, I'm not sure, but I can tell you that if you Google it, and I did not put any of those references in, you will see it in its former glory and its current glory.
So we can take it. It's subject to modern art, can we?
Yes, quite lovely actually, some of it. I can say that I specifically took a couple of steam train trips through so that I could view it from the equivalent of the street, which was the railway line, as we were slowly going under the block. It goes for quite some time.
Thank you.
The next item is the Central Electric Power Board substation, item 87, which Ms Cadigan has spoken to. And I agree with what has been stated, and also modified that so that it represents what has been suggested. The next item, 89, is the Frankton restrooms. These are off Commerce Street in Frankton, not associated with the railway. They were one of two. In the process of time, one has been removed, which is the one over in Hamilton East. And this one is under a COC, as I understand it, or may not even need a COC because it wasn't actually notified. But there is indication on the ownership file that imminent demolition is likely, perhaps in the next couple of weeks.
Well, thank you for that. I guess you just keep us updated on that one, and it may drop off if that's the case.
The next two items are interrelated, and these are both on the Waikato Hospital campus site. And the owners have actually put forward a further submission, but I was unable to find any expert evidence on the current website. So the J. Gordon Smith residence is a house that sits down on Pembroke Street at the foot of the main campus, one of a number of houses that used to be on site for the superintendents and doctors. And this particular person was instrumental in developing vaccines and became a national figure for his work. His building has been retained on site. Attached to his building was a specially made laboratory. It looks about the size of a very small garage, or you might call it a garden shed. And in this particular little laboratory was where he spent his days developing vaccines for the dairying industry. This laboratory little building was picked up to allow for the development on the site, so it's no longer in its exact context. It's associated in the garden beside the house, and it has been placed within a central part of the hospital campus, and is beside another specific relocated heritage item, which is a gazebo. So while it's not normal to put valuing against an item that has been relocated because it diminishes some of its value, in the case with this, it's still within its context of the hospital, in which the importance is attached to Mr. Smith and his work. It has been carefully relocated. And in its siting, while it's not connected to the house anymore, still demonstrates the aspects that actually make it important in my view. So relocated, but it has a strong context. And the item that probably is just the little difference between HCC and my view is that the work that went through, the value of this particular scientist probably sits at a level that's actually at least regional, and so I've just left it at that rather than just local, noting that the work is also the Waikato Regional Hospital, and which has many other little sub-hospitals, but this was a central place. There may be
But
other...
you
sorry.
say it was relocated. Why was
Yes.
it relocated?
Well, initially, it wasn't in the way of a new building that was being developed on the site.
Oh, it's been relocated on site.
It's been on the next block within the bigger campus of the
Right,
Waikato
okay.
Hospital.
So it could be relocated again.
It could be relocated again. It could be rather tricky. It will be completely surrounded by buildings. But yes, it could be relocated again. It's recognised as a small museum within the campus. They did pick it up with most of its fabric. 9 Wicker Street is going to be discussed by Ms Williams. The next item is the Geo Boys office, which is in 6 Alma Street, which is just down here next door, very close to the old former Borough Council chambers. This was initially going to be put forward as 2 different places, and the secondary place has actually been removed. I'd agree with excluding the exterior, which applies to all the suggestions that Ms Cadigan's actually made on a number of these items. And I found no further submission or evidence from the owners of the Geo Boys. And I would note that sometimes that's because we do have some emails that tend to track around, but there's no evidence of emails in our current system. Waikato Heritage Group either. This is an unusual 2-storey building, started as 1, had another portion popped on the top. The next item is the Murupiko Kindergarten. This sits over in River Road, and this is the one that a site visit is noted was not possible. Hopefully I have that correct, interpreted that correctly.
Just in terms of the principles of listing, I mean, we had that conversation earlier. I mean, are you of view that that a site visit is essential prior to concluding the matter should be scheduled?
Yes, I do. I do.
So at the moment, your recommendation on this one is it not be scheduled?
I've agreed with what the expert has said for Hamilton City Council and noted that a visit is required. So it would be subject to the visit, yes. Sorry.
Your recommendation at this stage is that it shouldn't be scheduled.
It's on hold, yes.
It shouldn't be scheduled.
Yes,
I mean, we have to make a decision to schedule. It's not a matter of hold.
correct.
So, yeah.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
And another kindergarten, this is the Jamison Kindergarten, which sits in the northwestern part of the city, designed by a different architect and approximately a decade later. The only item here that was probably a little bit of variance, and it's only a minor detail, is that the drawings held at the museum appear to be concept, and we have re-clarified that there is a little addition on the front that happens at a later date. And the other item is just this, the aspect of historical value. This particular place is strongly associated with the president of the Waikato Kindergarten Association. And I think we've just covered off the next one. My interpretation of what Ms Cadigan said is that it was agreed in part, subject to a site visit, by which I do interpret that until the site visit is actually completed, then it sits in the same category as the other one. I can't say it.
I mean, I'm taking that that's axiomatic, both from what Ms Cadigan has said earlier and also what you're saying. So unless in actual fact site visits are done and confirmed before we make our decisions, then they're not going to be scheduled. I think that's where we get to. So I'll leave that in both of your hands for these ones.
With the next category, just because it's relevant, have you undertaken site visits for the ones that HCC doesn't support, that you've put forward? And if you haven't undertaken site visits, would you accept that site visits are necessary before we could accept them?
So yes, I do think it is very good practice to make sure that you visit the site and you're able to have access to the building if the owners are in agreement. For all of these, I have definitely been on the outside of the building, but for only some have the owners allowed access.
Are you able to identify which of
Yes.
these ones in the table you've actually formally undertaken a site visit and those you haven't?
Yes, so the 033, which is the wall that is on the public footpath, and that would be, and the one that's missing off this table would also be 023, Hui Te Rangiora Marae. Yes, that's had a visit. So the others have been from the street.
Sorry, 033 and...
So it was 033 and 023, Hui Te Rangiora Marae are the two where access was one possible and two agreed to. The others have not. The G.E. Clark building, 003, this one has proved difficult. The owner has a further submission that stated that the information did not reflect his understanding of the place. The original historical research by about 4 parties indicated that the old building remained on this particular site, which is just down the back here. But it's clear on further investigation after his clarification that it appears that what happened is that parts of the existing old building was actually reused within the newer building and incorporated into it. So I have re-clarified that in the form and amended it prior to it coming into council. It is definitely one that sits very much on the boundary line, partially because of that modification, that there's no substantial amount of the original building actually intact. The other part, though, is that this remains under historic value, one of the few surviving agricultural supply stores in Hamilton. And I've given the example of the Newton King building, which is down on the north end of Victoria Street, which was originally put forward but withdrawn, and also the FAC, which is the 2-storey building that sits in Frankton, right next door to the goods shed, the railway's goods sheds. So with this one, I would be comfortable with pushing it under the threshold, but it's certainly a little tricky one. The next item, 24, is the Colombo Street Maru Boys Hostel. And this was clearly notated that cultural had not been addressed and needed to be addressed. That has not happened to date. This particular item was originally put forward by Tom Rower. along with the other items that were placed on the Waikato Heritage list. And it's one of these combination ones where it was hoped that the cultural plan change variation would have progressed. Yes, so this is where this one actually sits. (33) is the remnant wall that sits on the Public Works compound site, which I've previously talked about. The owners did a further submission and were concerned about the development potential if this was to remain, and also noted that it was seen as a remnant and therefore not high enough in terms of the threshold. So with this one, I would say that again, it's one that sits, in my view, on the boundary, but I do not, in my view, consider something that is a remnant or a relic should not be given status, taking into account also that we're talking about place and not just the item. And so, for example, Hamilton's got and had two significant walls. There was one over on the Catholic site in Hamilton East, an old brick wall, which caused quite a lot of controversy when it came down and forced a change, I think, in resource consenting for, I think it might be Ebbet Waikato. I can't quite remember the car company that's actually there. The other, of course, which was put forward originally by WSP was the hill cutting that we've got behind us as well. Very important in local heritage valuing. So my view is that, you know, while again it would be good to have the building and wider context, this is a particular significant site in the development of Hamilton's government centre, and there are no longer those physical connections to these organisations that were instrumental across the Waikato, which is the Public Works and the Ministry of Works. Next is the Te Awa Flats, which
So,
is...
sorry,
yes.
just to conclude that, from what I hear you saying, you don't seem to be saying it's on the cusp. You seem to be saying it's over the cusp.
I think this is one of the issues as to where it sits on that particular line. I would agree it sits just over the line in my view, but it is a boundary threshold consideration.
And it seems to be a monument to the Ministry of Works.
Public
Blind faith, yes, right. Okay.
Yes. It is also an archaeological site. 038 are the Te Awa Flats, which is a block of two-storey Art Deco flats sitting over towards the river, down a side street. And correctly, as Ms Cadigan has indicated, it has been modified a number of times over the last few decades. In my view, however, it remains to be considered when it comes to architectural heritage. Taking in and out of aluminium joinery windows is something that is not unheard of. In terms of...
There doesn't seem to be an assessment for this one. Is that right?
There should be.
I've got a gap between 033 and 051, so there is one. That's all right, if there's one that can come in later. I was just checking to see whether there was one.
Yes, there should be. There should be. It may have happened at the end of the collection, I think, yes. So on this one, I would confirm that in my view it's on the threshold, and for clarity, I would be happy with it falling below the threshold. The house at Rifle Range Road, 109, this is the stone bungalow. And this one is still, in my view, of importance. However, it's noted that the process with this particular one has been difficult. And when the owner was able to actually interface and discuss. He did point out a number of aspects to do with the research. Research was based on 4 different historians' viewpoint, and it would appear that from what Mr. Robinson has indicated, he is quite correct in terms of when the building was actually built and its associations as well. It is actually, though, still part of Cohegle's land, and this is, I think, where some of the confusion happened because the site was used by the drovers of the day. However, the other aspect that he fed back to the Waikato Historical Group is that a historian, architectural historian, had actually placed the item in a book, and that this was done perhaps back in the 1980s, early 1990s. There were only 3 or 4 people in Hamilton, visiting Hamilton, and who also produced books on bungalows, and we've been unable to actually find that documentation to indicate that it's been put forward as an example of bungalow specific use and design utilising stone. It remains an example of a bungalow in Hamilton with the use of stone that remains rare. There are no other examples that I'm aware of. Yes. And the next 2 items are the 2 little shops that sit in Victoria Street. This is the Maunder building, which is on the southern side of an alleyway and is a very early example of a Hamilton town shop. It's retained a reasonable amount of integrity, and it's associated with the work of T.H. White, who was a significant 19th century architect into the early 20th century. Beside it, on the other side of the alleyway, is the Mackenzie commercial building. This is the one that's got the 2 little humps on the top and currently has a restaurant residing in it. Originally, the northern building, the Mackenzie building, was put forward for scheduling to Hamilton City Council way back in the 1990s. And it was known as the Waikato, when it was known as the Waterbed World. It has a modified veranda on the front of it, which hides it to a degree. So these 2 little buildings are part of a very tiny collection of early Hamilton shops that have actually survived the process that have taken place in the southern end of the commercial area of the city. One identified for quite some time, and the other one, it was a little bit tricky, but it has been on the focus, for instance, of the Hamilton Library staff addressing this particular building. Each has its own characteristics. The people who have resided in the building, particularly in the Maunder one, includes a very famous Waikato photographer known as Gaze. Maunder is also the man who did, and his family, a large number of shops and buildings and developments around Frankton and Hamilton. And in combination with the alleyway, which is also a part, demonstrates something that's completely lost now from Hamilton, where we had little shops, an alleyway in the middle, and you had another row of businesses at the back. And so today this is still, and now probably is, one of the few examples of what basically Victoria Street used to be like. 2 little shops, alleyway, and the Saddlers and everyone else sitting in the back. So they're kind of funny little buildings. They're not architectural wonders. They're probably what I'd call eclectic. But much of their fabric survives, apart from, in the case of the Maunder Gaze building, the front facade has been modified. The posts were taken away, or fell down, can I say, I think, quite a number of decades ago. But both of these buildings could easily be improved on in terms of the way they actually address the street and how they represent the values of those times. There's only, with these two buildings, approximately 4 little buildings now left in this entire set of blocks. What I would disagree with in terms of what Ms Cadigan said is that by having these within the historic heritage area that's proposed for Victoria Street, that this provides sufficient robust protection. And on that page 21 that's in Mr Knott's assessment for Victoria Street, from what I've viewed, he didn't go back in and look at all the buildings down the street. He used the existing data, the existing scheduled and listed places. And these two little buildings have beside them opportunity. They don't have scheduled, listed heritage valuing, and from the inference, there are opportunity to utilise and develop. And so I think with going down into the details of the proposed HA for Victoria Street, there have been some items missed, and these are two that should have been considered, along with the alleyway in between them. It's page 21 of Mr Knott's section 32 appendix, and it's headed with Garden Place to former Hamilton Hotel, and there's some rather lovely little elevations there, and on the bottom row you'll see on the right the heritage building H39, the Hamilton Hotel. Then you'll see the Opportunity facade, which is a reasonably new building, the Embassy Park, which it used to be the Embassy Theatre, and then you'll see this funny little white building with a high peaked roof, and then an alleyway, and then an even stranger looking kind of facade to the left of that. So these are the two little buildings in question. The other two heritage buildings, a little bit further north, and that's the Victoria Building and Sahara Building. So these two are scheduled. Of course, the Hamilton Hotel also retains its scheduling. These were scheduled quite some time ago when originally the South End was being looked at. Yes. Thank you.
General question. Just in your statement, you noted that you were a previous past member of the, I think you're no longer a member of the Waikato Heritage Group,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes, I stepped out of it because of the potential conflict, and it's proven to be, over the ensuing time that's taken place, something that I've attempted my best to address by standing aside anything that I would have a personal conflict with from day one.
When
But
did
yes.
you stop being a member of the group?
It would have been probably about a year before this actually started.
Okay. And you also made mention of a submission that you made in your personal capacity
That
for
is
this,
correct. That
but
is correct.
your assessments don't reflect what was in your personal submission?
No.
Thank you, that was all I had.
Chair, I have a couple of quick, just following on, I have a few questions, just following on from my colleague. So you're, in your capacity as a paid professional witness on this matter?
Yes,
You
professional,
are.
not
Okay.
paid, if you'd
Okay.
like that clarified.
Okay, but, okay, thank you.
Maybe paid in kind, shall we say that?
How's paid in kind? How does that work? Can I ask you a question? You know, when considering giving built heritage status to a building, in your mind, does that building have to be able to be seen and to be able to have entrance to? So, no.
No, not at all. And for many of the buildings in Hamilton, they're not seen. If you take Pā House and Piranha Park, completely hidden, from the community. It doesn't, in my view, diminish the potential heritage qualities or values of the place. You can definitely have sites and places that aren't visited, aren't open to the public. They just need to be able to meet that threshold of having those heritage qualities.
Right. Okay. So the examples you gave, are you saying you can't actually get to any of those? You can't see any elements of those?
You can barely see the Pa House one. It's privately compounded and fenced and has a whole lot of bits and pieces around it. If you took, for instance, the Smith property, that's quite difficult to get to. Right. You could view if you could stop outside on Pembroke Street.
But you can see it?
You can see one side of it, right. but it's still primarily hidden.
Okay, thank you. So if you turn your mind to page 80 in this document that you've provided us, and that is the underground platform.
Yes.
And in fact, page 1 of has a historical photo of it as it was then, and then obviously a few pages later there's a photo of it then being graffitied.
Yes.
You'll accept that there is absolutely no public access to that platform?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
There's no public access, only viewing from the train.
Okay, thank you. And in your documentation, you say and sorry, just on that, when you say on the train, but it's not lit.
No, it's not.
So
lit.
you're underground.
That is correct. That is correct.
And the only trains that go through are
Usually the steam excursions.
right.
Special excursion trains are the passenger ones that go
But
through.
they are the only infrequent users, other than freight trains.
Freight and goods.
So
that is
freight
correct.
trains use it frequently?
Yes,
Okay, thank
that
you.
is correct.
I see in your document the extent, the proposed extent of the area includes the entrance off Anglesey Street, commonly known as Centre Place, the shopping mall, the platform, the ramp, the seating, the tiling. Can you confirm whether or not there is in fact any seating, tiling or NZR signage still there?
I'm not sure about the actual NZR signage, but there's definitely tiles, concrete, pillars, the ramps are there. There is seating remnants there, some of it covered in rubble currently. And the entrance is a little bit confused, but it's sitting, I think, just here off Anglesey Street. Whoops, wrong way. Just getting my location right in between.
So are you aware that that entranceway is in fact a private entranceway to
Yes.
car parks of tenants in the high-rise building? There's no public entrance?
Yes, I am aware of that.
So when you say you want it to have built heritage protection, are you saying that's including the entrance on Anglesey Street?
I am, and the purpose is that if in the future, and this has been some of the discussion over a decade in the Waikato Times, is if it's reopened. And so that is online as documented discussion.
And are you saying, my reading of your comments is you've liaised with Kiwi Rail?
No, I haven't, no. Hamilton City Council is, I understand, the party that first started the conversation.
Oh, right. And yes, you're correct. Owner, Kiwi
Yes,
Railway Corporation, Kiwi Rail opposes. They're the operator.
that is correct.
And I think council are going to talk to
Yes,
the owner, Kiwi Property, who owns the entrance and the high rise, but they haven't had an opportunity to submit.
I'm not sure whether they have or not.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question, but I've lost it. So you're fortunate, probably. It may come back to me in the course of Miss Williams giving her statement on behalf of WHG. So, Miss Williams, how long do you anticipate taking to discuss Deanwell School?
2 seconds.
Excellent. In that case, we welcome you, but not beyond the time you've just stated.
Oh, I've just had clarification
minutes,
from my
yeah.
colleague. We actually did drop the Te Awa Flats, which is 38, not pursued. I've just been advised that the Te Awa Flats, which is WHG 038, was actually on not pursued.
Yes, come and join your colleague, and then we'll take a break after that. And Ms. Calloway, thank you very much for all of this work. That's going to be a headache for us, but thank you for giving us a headache. Yes.
I'm sorry it wasn't better formatted and finalised.
Yeah, that's right. We'll work our way through that. So, Ms. Williams, you're taking us to Deanwell School.
I am, possibly 10 minutes.
That's fine.
I can see it's my cup of tea time. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to make my statements this afternoon. And where do I start? Sorry, let's get my papers shuffled. You will have received my submissions, my statement of evidence.
Yes, we have. We've read it. So.
I don't think we need to
yes.
read the whole thing again. You know.
And W12 Deanwell is in the book of
Yes.
assessments. So thank you for that too.
Okay, so that was submitted for hearing 2, and then after the revision of qualities was established, I reworked that document and assessed again the heritage qualities of the school. The other item that has caused a bit of confusion, and which Ms Cadigan picked up, was that Graham Burgess was engaged as a peer review, but in fact he undertook a second heritage assessment, so we have double whammy here, that we've got 2 heritage assessments for the school, and he also reviewed my material at the same time and made comments on that, so it's not quite a peer review, but sort of.
Right.
Yeah.
But can you confirm whether Mr. Burgess actually did he do a site visit as part of that
Yes, yes, he and I
assessment?
did the site visit
Thank you.
together, yeah. Which was stunning, quite frankly. Okay, so Deanwell School has been identified for, well, as many as 50 years as being a school of considerable historic interest, in that it was the first open plan school designed in New Zealand and set a trend. Possibly didn't last as long as the designer hoped, but it did set a trend for open plan schooling and education. And part of that was that Mr. Calloway, the designer who worked for the ministry, made it so that it could be rearranged and changed, so that really only the base units were static, but you could take the walls here and there and rearrange them. And that has continued a bit, but it also now has been, some of those open plan units have been closed in into the more conventional closed education spaces. However, when you visit there, you can clearly see the intent of that design, and that it's built around a courtyard system. I mean, I went to Woodstock School, it was just 1 block or 2 blocks open, you know, there weren't even sunshades in those days. But Deanwell it has these relatively closed-in courtyards, which makes for, I was going to say intimate play, but that's not quite what I meant. Sort of a different aspect of how to play. You could go out onto the field if you wanted, but it's a more secure setting for children. You know, there's hopscotch drawings and so on. Or you could sit around, and there's garden beds, raised garden beds as well, that the children are planting with veggies and flowers. There's one historic tree that the caretaker pointed out to us. I'm not following my script here. So, in my viewing of Deanwell, I was made aware of the care given to maintenance and repair, and that community values were quite evident in the planting and cultivating plants, not just for their aesthetics, but for technology and for foodstuffs. So there's flax bushes and so on that the children could use and harvest if it fitted part of the art program. So, where do I go from here?
That's all right. I mean, you don't need to go through. I mean,
No, I don't need to go through
we
it.
have read it.
Okay,
I mean, we've got some questions for you if you'd like to take some questions.
I really hope you can get to visit it though, so if that could be arranged, that would be fantastic.
I mean, the first question obviously is that there is opposition from, I assume, the Ministry of Education, is
Yes.
it? Or
Yes, the Ministry of Education has submitted and made a further submission as well.
but they're not appearing. That's as far as
They
they've
say
gone.
they want to appear, which is to be heard, but they've submitted a document to be tabled,
Yes.
so I
yes.
can't answer you whether they're coming or
Yeah.
not.
Okay. All right. And in terms of the assessments that have been done in this document here, in terms of the rankings, they're your rankings or Mr.
Yeah.
Burgess's rankings, or whose rankings are
They're mine,
They're
but
yours?
I took into account what Mr. Burgess
they? Yeah.
noted and that Ms Cadigan noted. I disagree with Ms Cadigan in that she says she prefers Mr Burgess's assessment about heritage, about the historic quality. Sorry, there's too many bits of paper in here. To me, that is it has very high historic value, high historic quality, because it's the first such school. And
But Mr. Burgess thought it was not so high.
yes, that's right. I should note again.
Just give us his reasons for that. Just give us his reasons why he thought it was of a lesser ranking on the
gonna find this piece of paper.
historic.
Yes.
Oh, we can turn it up. It's not last page, page 39. Apparently, it's on page 39.
He uses the terms moderate.
Yes, he's yes, moderate. But because he said it's associated with the South Auckland Education Board. Right.
And it's a key element in the development
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the suburb, which I agree with, but I think it is,
Yeah.
it could be rated high.
But you both agreed that on the second criterion, it's high.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And medium
And Ms
context.
Cadigan, where are you on that second criterion? You accept that it's high? Yeah, no, I know the qualification. Yeah. You didn't go there as a child?
Not.
Right.
Not, no. So until I've seen it, I couldn't comment
Yeah,
further
yeah,
on
yeah,
how intact
yeah.
the
But on the papers, you're comfortable? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, not.
One question, and it's just in relation to the extent of place. So I'm just looking at the picture in the WHG assessment. There's a picture, it's page 2 of the assessment of number 12, the Deanwell School, and there's a picture which shows the red dash line and says that everything within that is included, and then it says underneath that the red starred buildings are also included. There's one little skinny building with a red star outside the dashed line. Is that included within the extent of place? It's down the bottom left.
Yes, that's the changing rooms and the swimming pool, I think those down there.
Yeah, so there's a red star there, so that's included within the extent of place in terms
Yeah,
of...
and Graham, Mr Burgess, I beg your pardon, Mr Burgess also includes those in his,
Okay, and the swimming pool's got a red dot.
Yeah.
Is that meant to be a
well,
star,
supposed to be a
or
red
is that...
star. I think it's
Yeah,
supposed to be a
so
star.
those two,
Yeah,
the
those
pool
two
and
there.
the changing rooms.
And Ms Cadigan says that our extents are different, but I disagree. There are very subtle differences in the, depending on that yellow line on Mr Burgess's thing. I think he excludes a stretch of about 1 metre by 5 metres of, looks like pasture or grass between those two, between the middle of those buildings there, which we've included that. I mean, it's part of the curtilage of the building. So I don't think the extents of that are that different at all. In terms of the ministry, they actually say that they're, when I find my piece of paper, the ministry submission states, quote, that scheduling any new heritage items on a school site would unreasonably raise the expectations of the school community and the wider public that the building would be protected under the district plan. And, okay, I agree in part. Yes, the expectations of the community would be raised with that, and what a good thing that would be. I disagree with their use of the word unreasonably. The place,
Can I just check? I'm assuming there's a designation over this.
Yes.
And is the designation much wider, presumably, than the extent of place proposed here or suggested? Yeah, that's what I would have thought too. So we've got the same argument that we had earlier on with respect to whether the designation trumps the issue or not. All right, thank you.
It is, however, also part of the ministry's own policy guidelines to look at and protect heritage values, and Hamilton already has several educational buildings in the district scheme, including a villa at Diocesan School. I mean, a wooden villa from the 1880s, I think it is, 1890s. That is definitely part of that school's campus and is well used and appreciated for itself as well as for its spaces that can be used for teaching. So I'm not quite sure how the ministry computes that. You know, so I mean, we've got 8 already scheduled school places, and there's 2 more that have been proposed. Hamilton West and Fairfield primary schools have been proposed, not by Heritage Group, but by council. They also say that it limits the potential use of the school and the buildings.
We understand that argument.
Yeah.
That's fine, and we'll turn up the ministry's, which I think was.
Is that me?
Was, from memory, that's done by consultants to the ministry, wasn't it? Done by Beckers or somebody who did that submission. That's all right, we can look it up.
Well, she's got an education.govt email.
Yeah, read like one I've seen before.
They did not submit any heritage expert evidence in their submission, as far as I can ascertain.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're disputing that part of it. It's more of a functional argument. That's all right, thank you, Ms Williams. Ewan, any questions? Anything else? Well, thank you. Is that WHG done? for the moment, is it?
I think so.
Well,
yeah.
thank you very much. We appreciate all the effort and for your attendance today. And I know we've got a couple more things after an afternoon break, but we will take a 15-minute break now till 25 to, and we're back with, which one of you is presenting next? I think it's Miss Callaway, isn't it, on behalf of, Neil Baker. Is it Neil or Niall? Niall, isn't it? Yeah. All right. And then Miss Williams on behalf of Mr. Callaway, unrelated, no relationship, of course. Yes, right, okay. Right, let's take a break till 25 to. Thank you.
I do this?
Right, well, clock's running, 10 seconds gone.
Hang on, there's no lawyer here.
Yes, there is.
No senior lawyer, sorry. That's all right. There's true. We don't need to wait.
Right, just turn your mic on. Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully that's working. I'm just putting another different hat on, and this
Yep.
is for Niall, almost said it, I did, Niall Baker, who, as you'll be aware, a number of hearings ago put forward Fairview Downs as an HHA, and I'm sure you've read the additional documentation, and it's just highlighting that since that time, both the community and others have put together a more thorough research document which includes plans, people involved, and includes workers of the actual firm, just to reconfirm that the parties involved are the right parties and that there is a widespread understanding across these blocks that this is a peerless suburb that we're actually looking at. And what I did is, when Mr. Baker asked me to do so, is to consider whether it might go above the threshold under the new interim criteria. And based on that additional information, which was provided again, I have put it forward as being high. It is primarily under one category, and that is historic. So the physical architectural remains the same as previously, and I have noted that the context also sits below that threshold and sits at medium, and I therefore have put it forward for consideration. As there is very limited comparison, the only comparison I could find is really Acacia proposed HHA, which is the street, the very far end of the city, the northwestern end there, and that seemed to me to be the one that was most suitable. And while the associated people directly with Peerless Homes development during that actual period have indicated that there are other places that Peerless was also building, it remains very clear that this is the central base and that the strength in what's being put forward historically is exactly that. This is a very significant Waikato-based mass production company that was developed, which is quite distinctively different to the others that have been put forward in a similar category. And so, yes, that's the evidence reinstated again, reset again, and I have taken into consideration the evidence of Ms. Galt, who indicates that Mr. Knott still holds his opinion on this as well.
But I think, and Dave, I don't know if we want to follow that up, but I think you've redrawn the boundaries again, haven't you? So it's a tighter proposal
That is
now.
actually, yes, sorry, yes. So you gave me great assistance in that process. You asked me to refine it, and that was done in I think it might have been after the first hearing, second hearing. I'm just trying to remember when that was actually done, and then that was actually provided back to you.
And my question to council is Richard Knott evaluated the reduced boundary, or are you still relying upon his assessment, which was the larger area? And I suspect that there's a difference.
We'll have to go
Yeah.
back and
Yeah.
check that.
I mean, I
understand
think
it was,
because you're relying upon his first round evaluation,
we are.
it would be good to get his assessment of the new boundaries to see whether that changes his characterisation or his overall assessment, particularly on that one dimension. It's I think, did you say the historic dimension, didn't you?
Yes, it's historic.
Because that's obviously the key dimension. So if that could be done, that would be of assistance.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes.
Dave, do you want to follow that?
Yes, because I mean, most of that southern area has dropped out apart from a fairly
Yes.
concise or single street virtually, isn't it, on both sides of one street?
Yes, the southern portion, all that remains of that is the identified Maori housing, which is a very small group.
Just one question, and I'm looking at the same map that everyone else is looking at. In your view, does it matter that the two areas are discrete? So you're saying they're one HHA, but they actually don't meet up, do they, now?
No, I don't think it necessarily matters because they're of the same time. They're part of a continuum. I think having a gap is a problem when you've got groupings, but it wouldn't be too dissimilar, for instance, if someone looked at the Lorenzen settlement of state houses that's actually spaced out with big gaps in between it, but you'd still be inclined to try and put the extent as the actual settlement. And I think this similarly applies to Fairview Downs, as they have a distinctive cultural valuing, which is the outer boundaries of the suburb.
And just so I'm clear, with the big, the northern area, the area inside the smaller red dash line is excluded.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah? All right. Thank you, Ms Callaway, again.
Thank you very
we'll
much.
obviously get a response from Richard Knott in due course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, I think Ms Williams on Alan Callaway.
An even shorter time.
Right, thank you.
So I don't have a lot more to add other than my assessments. The peer reviewer did reconfirm her view with my assessment after the change of qualities, the assessment qualities. She still agreed with what I had to say, which is nice. And Jane Matthews is conservation architect in Auckland, so she knows what she's talking about. So essentially, I just hand it over to questions, if you've got any questions.
I'll anticipate there are no questions because it's supported, but just in case there are some questions. Dave? No? So thank you, Ms Williams.
There we
Thank you
go.
for...
Yeah. I
staying.
aim to please.
Yep.
Okay.
I better just confirm that council does support the inclusion
Oh,
of
yes.
9 Waker Street. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right. In that case, I think, unless there's anything, no? All right, in that case, we're done for today, so thank you all very much, and
Thank
we'll
you.
resume at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.